Imagine you spend like your entire life building this incredibly fast, highly tuned race car.
Oh yeah, like obsessing over every little detail.
Exactly. You obsess over the engine, polish the frame, and then you finally get behind the wheel, turn the key, hear it roar to life.
Best feeling in the world.
Right. But then you realize you never actually built a steering wheel.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's a problem.
You have all the power in the world and absolutely no idea where you're going to drive it. And I mean, have you ever felt like that about your own life?
I think a lot of people have, honestly.
Right. You work incredibly hard, you're studying for hours, putting in endless overtime at a job, aggressively saving money,
Just grinding away.
just grinding. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, you just stop and wonder, why am I actually doing this? Like, what is the actual point of all this exertion?
Yeah, it's the classic existential wall. We build the machinery of our lives with this incredible precision, but we completely forget to program the destination,
The effort just becomes its own justification.
which is a really dangerous loop to get trapped in, you
It
know?
really is. And that elusive why, that missing steering wheel, is the core of our deep dive today. We are exploring a really fascinating framework on how to discover your true purpose and, well, more importantly, how to align your entire life around it once you find it.
It's super practical stuff.
It is. Our source material today is an excerpt titled Message for the Young People: Find Your Purpose, Change Your Life. And this actually comes from a much larger work called The Architect of Purpose, A Guide for Global Youth, which is the autobiography of Reverend Sun Myung Moon.
And before we delve into the mechanics of this framework, we really should establish some parameters for our discussion today.
Yes, definitely. Because the source material we're analyzing contains some very specific theological and spiritual viewpoints, I want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener. Our goal in this deep dive is strictly to analyze and understand the author's unique philosophical framework.
Right, we're just looking at the ideas.
Exactly. We are exploring these ideas totally impartially. We're not endorsing or, taking sides on any religious or political viewpoints here. We are simply unpacking the text to see how this specific framework approaches the universal human problem of finding meaning.
Yeah, we're basically looking at the architecture of his argument. And the author starts by setting the stage with a rather unique premise about youth itself.
Which really caught me off guard, honestly.
Right. He argues that youth is meant to be a period of tranquility, like it's supposed to be this crucial building block, a quiet preparation for the future. And he frames this through a spiritual lens, stating that God actually possesses a deep curiosity about young people.
Curiosity, that is such a specific word choice.
It really is.
It frames the divine not just as like a static creator or a judge, but as an observer who's deeply interested in this unfolding narrative.
Like God is leaning in to see what happens next.
Yeah. It implies this open-ended future where human agency actually matters.
Well, the text argues that every human was created for greatness, invested with complete love. And because of that origin, the potential to accomplish literally anything is inherently there.
And that untapped potential is what sparks the divine curiosity.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this because I have to push back a little on this whole idea of youthful tranquility.
I had a feeling you might.
I mean, when I look at modern youth, or even, remember my own, tranquil is basically the last word I would ever use.
Oh, absolutely.
Modern youth feels way less like a tranquil building block and more like, I don't know, being thrown into the deep end of a chaotic pool while someone yells at you to invent a new swimming stroke.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And your pushback actually highlights the exact tension the author is addressing here, that chaotic pool you're describing. That's precisely why the text notes so many young people are, in his words, just wandering around with no goal or purpose.
So the chaos is a symptom of the wandering.
Right. The tranquility he's talking about isn't about sitting quietly under a tree avoiding the world. It's the internal tranquility of having a set direction amid all that chaos.
Oh, I see.
He contrasts this modern wandering with historical great leaders. According to the author, great leaders had a definite coordinate plotted from childhood.
They already knew where they were sailing, so the storms didn't throw them into a massive existential crisis.
Exactly. Because they nurtured a purpose in their hearts from such a young age, they could exert massive energy toward it efficiently. And the author makes this striking point for these leaders, whether they were sleeping or, just playing with friends. Every single youthful action was geared toward preparing for the stage they would stand on in the future.
Wait, even playing with friends?
Yeah. Their play wasn't just an escape from reality, it was an active preparation for it.
So even a seemingly meaningless game of tag was building, like the physical resilience or the strategic thinking they would need decades later.
Precisely.
That's wild. But so, okay, if purpose starts in the mind and the spirit like that, how does it translate to the physical world? Because, we live in biological bodies that get tired, they get sick, they break down under stress.
Well, the author actually experienced a profound shift that answers that transition from the spiritual to the physical. He describes this intense spiritual awakening where, upon coming to deeply love God, his entire internal focus shifted completely outward.
But a total paradigm shift.
Right. He stopped focusing on his own survival and even the survival of his immediate family and shifted toward this deep, encompassing love for all of humanity and creation.
And the text mentions he loved everything, like literally to the point of deeply loving the trees on the hills and the fish in the waters.
Yeah. His spiritual senses developed to see a divine handiwork in literally everything around him.
It's just a complete dissolution of the ego.
Total disillusion. Instead of viewing the world as a resource to extract from, he began viewing it as an interconnected web that he was responsible for serving.
But having that massive, all-encompassing spiritual vision, that creates a very practical biological problem, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like upgrading the operating system of a computer to this incredibly powerful next-generation software.
Yeah.
Suddenly, your old, dusty hardware needs to be able to keep up.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Right. If the software is saying, love all of humanity and be ready to serve at a moment's notice in any environment, a fragile laptop from 10 years ago is just going to overheat and crash.
And the author recognized that exact hardware limitation.
Yeah.
He states very clearly that the body is simply the container to hold a healthy spirit.
The container. I like that.
So as his mind changed to conform to this massive unconditional love, he realized he had to drastically strengthen his physical container to actually execute those spiritual commands.
And he didn't just casually jog on the weekends. The list of how he prepared this container is intense.
Oh, it's grueling.
He played soccer, which builds relentless cardiovascular endurance. He boxed, which trains reaction time and, the psychological ability to handle direct confrontation. He practiced traditional Korean martial arts, and this blew my mind. He even created an entirely new martial art himself.
Won Wado.
Yes, Won Wado.
What's fascinating here is the biomechanical philosophy of Won Wado. It isn't just about striking or aggression. The author explains that its core principle relies on moving the body in a smooth, circular motion, almost like a dance.
Rather than rigid movements.
Right. The physical logic here is that greater power and resilience actually come from circular motion, rather than moving in a straight line.
Which, if you think about how that applies to absorbing force, makes perfect sense in life, too.
How so?
Picture a rigid oak tree during a hurricane. It stands perfectly straight, fighting the wind with absolute resistance, and eventually it just snaps in half.
Right. It can't handle the sheer force.
But a palm tree, it bends, it curves, it basically whips the kinetic energy around its trunk. It survives by moving fluidly with the force rather than opposing it directly.
That's exactly it. Or consider how a trained boxer rolls with a punch.
Yo, yeah.
If you take a blow straight to the jaw while locking your neck, you absorb the full kinetic force. You're going to get knocked out. But if you turn your head and pivot your body in a circular motion at the exact moment of impact, you dissipate that energy.
So the circular motion of Won Wado is inherently adaptable.
Inherently. It's a perfect physical manifestation of his spiritual goal to be constantly ready, fluid, and capable of enduring whatever chaotic environment he's called to.
But a beautifully designed container, no matter how fluid or well-trained, is practically useless unless it actually survives extreme, unpredictable conditions. Like the palm tree theory only matters when the hurricane actually hits.
And he certainly maintained the daily discipline to prepare for that hurricane. His daily routine was absolutely relentless.
I couldn't believe this part.
He developed specific stretching exercises for his muscles and joints, alongside a self-developed breathing exercise.
It's just a staggering level of discipline. It really makes you wonder how he sustained that psychological endurance when, most of us can barely keep a New Year's resolution for 2 weeks.
Yeah, the gym is empty by February.
Exactly. But the text notes, he started doing this for 30 minutes a day when he was young, and then increased it to an hour a day as he got older, and he never missed a day.
Never.
Even during exhausting global speaking tours. There's a detail in the text where he says that if he was traveling and didn't have time, he would literally do these stretching and breathing exercises while sitting on the toilet.
It speaks to the absolute non-negotiable nature of his purpose.
It really does.
When an action is tied to a transcendent objective, it bypasses the part of the brain that negotiates for comfort. The container must be maintained, regardless of the setting. And that rigorous daily maintenance of his bodily mechanics leads directly to the ultimate test of that container.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Fast forward to the year 2008. The author is involved in a catastrophic helicopter crash.
Terrifying.
The text paints this incredibly vivid, terrifying scene. Out of nowhere, the helicopter is suddenly surrounded by these thick, black rain clouds, and in an instant, it crashes directly onto a mountainside.
The violence of that moment is hard to overstate.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate sudden transfer of kinetic energy.
And the helicopter rolls over completely. The author is left hanging upside down, suspended entirely by his seatbelt in the twisted wreckage.
Now connect that chaotic, terrifying moment back to those daily exercises on the toilet, the stretching, the one huo do. The text tells us that instinctively, in the split second of the crash, he tightly grabbed the armrests on both sides of the seat.
Just sheer core strength and grip strength, holding his body stable while the world literally turned upside down.
Yes, and the author draws a direct literal conclusion from this event based on the biomechanics of his own body.
What did he say?
He states that if he had not been so extraordinarily diligent in his daily flexibility and strengthening exercises, the sheer physical force of being violently suspended upside down would have snapped his hip instantly.
Wow, that perfectly illustrates the concept of bodily tensegrity.
Right.
Because if your muscles are tight and rigid, they act like tight ropes. When a sudden shock hits, that force transfers directly into the joints and bones, causing them to just shatter.
But because he stretched his muscles and joints every single day for decades.
His fascial network basically acted like a shock absorber, distributing the violent force of the crash across his entire body rather than localizing it at the hip joint.
He was training to ensure the container wouldn't shatter before the mission of the spirit was complete. It's a profound shift in how we view physical health.
It really is. Most people hear exercise and they think of vanity, or just hitting a baseline of cardiovascular health so their doctor stops lecturing them.
Right, wanting to look good at the beach.
Exactly. But the author exercised for readiness. It wasn't an aesthetic choice. It was a structural requirement for fulfilling his purpose.
But of course, keeping the container intact during a helicopter crash only solves the biological problem of staying alive.
Right. It doesn't solve the existential problem of what you actually do with that saved life. If you survive a horrific crash just to go back to a completely meaningless daily routine, the entire exercise regimen was kind of pointless.
Yeah, you're back at square one.
Which forces us to look at the software driving the machine, our education, our wealth, and our careers.
And this is where the framework becomes highly applicable to the daily life of the listener. The author unpacks the standard sociological view of education. Usually parents are the ones pushing their kids to study, right?
Oh, always.
And they do it mostly out of fear. They know children need to prepare for a highly competitive future, and they worry that if their kids fall behind, they'll face the world unprepared and vulnerable.
So the kid studies, but they hate it. It's an externally enforced mandate, not an internal drive.
Initially, yes. Very few students go to school because they genuinely love the raw act of memorizing facts.
True.
But the text notes that as students push through, they can gradually learn to enjoy it. They start to find their own path. The author identifies this specific transition when a student develops their own self-interest in learning as the true sign of maturity.
But the author also warns that even that self-interest can be completely misdirected if there's no larger purpose attached to it.
He does.
There's this anecdote in the source where the author comes across a Korean student who is working incredibly hard on his English schoolwork. And he asks the student, "Why are you working so hard to learn English?"
And what does the student say?
The student gives the most universally accepted answer ever. He says, "To get into a university."
Right. And the author immediately calls that motivation foolish.
Which at first glance sounds incredibly harsh. Getting into a university is a huge, difficult achievement.
It is.
But the author makes a crucial distinction here. He says a university is just a place to study subjects in the course of pursuing a larger objective. It cannot be the objective itself.
It is mistaking the threshold for the destination.
It's exactly like spending 18 years obsessively training for your driving test. You memorize the entire manual, you practice parallel parking for hundreds of hours, you pass the test with flying colors, and they hand you a license.
Congratulations, you're a driver.
Right. And you run out to your car, sit behind the wheel, put the key in the ignition, and suddenly realize you have absolutely nowhere you actually want to go.
It's a tragedy of misplaced effort. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the exact same fallacy applies to how we view wealth.
Oh man, yeah.
The text emphasizes that you should never define your life goal in terms of how much money you want to make. The author notes that he personally never received a formal salary, yet he always managed to eat and survive while executing his global work.
Because money is merely kinetic energy.
Exactly. It is a means to effect change. It is never the goal itself.
There's a line from the text. Money gained without a prior objective will soon be wasted.
That's a powerful statement.
It reveals so much about human behavior. If you don't know what the money is actually for, it just evaporates into meaningless lifestyle inflation. You buy a bigger house to hold more things you don't need simply because you have the license but no destination.
Which brings us to the ultimate application of this framework, your occupation.
Right.
The author states that choosing to be a firefighter, a farmer, or a soccer player is largely up to your inherent talents and interests. But that is just a job title.
So what does this all mean? If the occupation is just the vehicle, then the purpose must be the direction the vehicle is driving.
Exactly.
It implies my job isn't my actual purpose. My purpose is what I intend to do with the skills and access my job provides me.
The text argues exactly that. True purpose transcends your occupation. The real question is not what you are doing, but what kind of life will you lead within that role.
The how and the why.
Yes. To set a transcendent objective is to give actual, enduring meaning to the mechanics of your career.
The source gives some incredibly inspiring examples of this. Let's say you decide your vehicle is going to be farming.
Okay.
A farmer without a transcendent purpose just grows crops to make money to survive another year.
Just a transaction.
Exactly. But a farmer with a transcendent objective, they set their goal to test new agricultural methods to develop better, hardier species of crops with the ultimate aim of eradicating world hunger.
And the daily biological actions of both farmers might look identical from the outside.
Right. They both wake up early, they both plant seeds, they both water the soil.
But the internal reality, the psychological endurance, is entirely different. The second farmer is fueled by a global mission. When a drought hits, the first farmer might just quit because the financial margin is gone.
Makes sense.
But the second farmer, they push through to develop drought-resistant wheat because humanity depends on it.
And the author also mentions a soccer player. To become a world-class athlete requires agonizing work and difficult training.
Grueling physical demands.
Yeah. And if your goal is just to be famous or rich, that motivation might snap the moment you tear a ligament or face a severe slump.
Because the payoff is gone.
Right. But if your objective is to heighten your country's image in the world, or to use your platform to establish camps that nurture the dreams of economically deprived kids, suddenly you have the psychological power to endure the pain of rehab. You can maintain your course.
It allows you to live a life that is, as the text beautifully puts it, a cut above those around you. You aren't just enduring the daily grind. You are actively building the infrastructure for a better world using your specific talents.
This has been such a journey of a deep dive today. We started by looking at how purpose fundamentally shifts your spiritual focus outward, moving from selfish survival to a global, interconnected love.
A massive paradigm shift.
And then we unpacked how that massive software update requires a meticulously trained physical container, a body with the tensegrity and resilience capable of surviving a literal helicopter crash.
Incredible.
And finally, we explored how this mindset completely redefines everything we do on a daily basis, preventing us from viewing our college degrees or our bank accounts as the final destination.
This raises an important question, though, which brings all of this theory back down to the reality of the listener's life.
What's the question?
Are you currently just studying or working to get a license? Are you just accumulating money without an objective? Or have you defined the transcendent objective that lies beyond those thresholds?
That is the crucial question to sit with. And before we go, looking at the full scope of the author's argument brings up one final, really provocative implication that I want to leave you with.
Yeah, if we truly adopt the author's premise that every single action we take should be geared toward a transcendent objective, it doesn't just change our own lives. It completely rewrites the concept of intergenerational purpose.
How so? Like, how does it affect the next generation?
Think about how we raise them. If you align your life to a transcendent objective, it forces you to completely change how you parent or mentor young people. If the university is just a toll booth and the career is just a vehicle, then our current societal obsession with asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or, punishing them over a B- in math is entirely misplaced.
Wow. We are training them for the driving test, but giving them no map.
Exactly. Plus, consider what the author said about downtime. He stated that every action of great leaders, even sleeping and playing, is geared toward preparing for their future stage.
Right, the game of tag.
Right. If that's true, it means there is no downtime in a purpose-driven life. Everything is preparation. So for the listener, look at what you did during your relaxation time yesterday.
Okay.
What future stage is that downtime secretly preparing you for?
Oh, that's heavy. We really should stop asking kids about their grades and start asking them about their worldview. We should be asking, what problem in the world breaks your heart enough that you want to dedicate your life to fixing it?
Yes. The math grade only matters if they need math to solve that specific problem.
That completely flips the script on how we guide the people coming up behind us.
It shifts the entire burden of education, from fear of failure to the excitement of a global mission.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Take a hard look at the vehicle you are building today, figure out exactly where you are driving it, and keep seeking those aha moments.